I'm really excited to introduce my guest today, and I think you're going to enjoy her perspective because it is so different from the typical diet culture, diet mentality that us ladies have grown up with here, especially in the States and in Western culture. So I know you're going to enjoy some of the gems that she shares with you. But first, let me introduce Allie to you. Allie Sempek is an internationally certified wellness coach and the founder of her own women's empowerment company, Ask Coach Allie. After a decade of disordered eating and failing to hate her body into being skinny, Allie craved more from her life than a smaller jean size. Today, she is changing the narrative of what healthy looks like by helping women to transform their relationship with food and with their self image and who they see in the mirror. Allie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to get started.
I'm very excited. We were having a lovely conversation off camera uh, when we first met this morning. So I'm excited to share some of the things that even came out in that conversation because we have more in common than I realized. But
Absolutely.
first, yeah, first, Allie, I want to find out what brought you to being a wellness health coach for women. How did you get there?
It's a very long story, and I'll try to keep it condensed for you. I always tell everyone that it really started back when I was young, when I was a child. I grew up in a family that was in the fitness community. My mom and uncle owned a gym. I grew up around bodybuilding, and my dad's a chiropractor. So I really lived and breathed the health world, or at least what I thought the health world was. And as I grew up, I developed several disordered eating problems, body image dysmorphia, um, and really struggled with my own body because I didn't quite fit into the narrative of what I had always seen as healthy or what the fitness industry told you to strive for. And so, fast forward about 20 years, um, I was working my 9 to 5 job, absolutely hated it, and realized that the common thing that kept coming up in my life was that people asked me, okay, what should I do? What is, your perspective on this? How can I have a healthier relationship with my body? What did you do? Right? I just kept being asked the questions. Um, and I decided, okay, how do I become someone that can help more women, transform their relationship with their bodies and food the way that I had to, because I couldn't find someone that could coach me through it. And so I really kind of made this game time decision to quit my corporate job and move back to my hometown and start a business from my parents' basement just based off of my own story.
Mm, I love it. I love it. So going back to that disordered eating, I really relate to this because when I grew up, that dieting culture
Yeah.
through the 70s in particular was just really taking off. And I
Mhm.
remember my mom going on and off diets, and it was a discussion within our household and putting myself on a diet when I gained weight right around puberty. All of a sudden my weight, you know how you get that growth spurt, and
Oh,
it was
yeah.
almost like the weight shot up first and then the height the height came later. And so I'm like, oh, I'm chunky, I need to do something about this. And my mother was kind of needling me about it, like, okay, you can't look this way, you got to do something about this. So I put myself on a diet, and it was just like, basically, I think Fresca was big at the time, the diet soda, and salads. It was like all that I knew, forget nutrition, protein, strength training, none of that none of that came into being. As a child, what do you think was the driver of the eating disorders? What was it, seeing everyone in the fitness community and trying to mold yourself into that mold?
I think it was a combination of a few things. And again, it relates a lot to your story as well. I think every woman can resonate with that they've had someone in their life at some point be on a diet, or pick themselves apart or say, I shouldn't eat that. I already ate today. It's the constant like microaggressions about our bodies. And growing up for me, I think it was a combination of, yes, growing up in that industry and seeing smaller bodies as the norm, but also growing up, and my mom and I have had beautiful conversations about this now. But growing up with a mom who was very hard on herself, she struggled a lot with her own appearance and her own confidence. And the way that she almost hid behind a facade was through fitness, it was through exercise. And so I heard a lot of things from her growing up that now today she's like appalled that she ever said. But at the time, it was so normalized. Things like, well, we're going to eat in a couple hours, just drink water. You don't need a snack. You don't need to eat something right now. Right. One of the things I told her the other day, and she was like, there's no way I said that. And I specifically remember it, was the mentality of, well, if you're on your period, you're going to be weighing a little bit heavier because you're holding on to more water weight. And I remember her saying, well, if you're really good this week, then you'll lose extra when you're done with your cycle. And she is just mortified that she would have ever said
Mm,
that. But that was such the mentality back then in the, late 90s, early 2000s. It wasn't like you're saying, it wasn't about strength training or knowing how much protein to eat. It wasn't about our internal health. It was all aesthetic. And so I think it was a combination of hearing that and then being in a society that really did just promote, this is what you should look like. And to your point, my experience, as well as most of my clients' experience, did start to transition a lot during puberty. I was already taller than all of the people in my class. I already had the body of a woman in sixth grade. And I looked at friends who were still shopping at smaller stores and could eat whatever they wanted. And I think it was the combination of all the messaging that just started telling me, well, you're not good enough. There's something wrong with you. You need to be smaller. You need to fix yourself because this is a problem. You stick out too much. You're too much, is kind of the constant
mhm,
wording that I always heard.
mm. It's so good that you're sharing this perspective because I think we equate being thin with being healthy, and that's
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily the case. In my 40s, I was certainly thin enough. I was a marathon runner. I was always running, cycling, doing century 100-mile bike rides. So, yeah, cardio queen, very thin. But I look back and I go, oh, I was a skinny fat. And my
Mm-hmm.
blood glucose, my blood sugar, fasting blood sugar was too high for my age at the time. So it doesn't always equate to health. Somebody can be a bigger size, a smaller size. And there's a big difference between, I'm always talking, I do talk a lot about the body fat with women, but I'm more aimed at the visceral, like the dangerous body fat that can cause cardiovascular. And I'll always say, hey, the pinch and inch, the subcutaneous is perfectly fine. And then genetics, you talked about genetics. We're built differently. I mean, even waist circumference, our bones,
Yeah. And
what kind
I
of
tell,
weight we can carry.
I tell clients too that genetics play a very small role in how um, we treat our bodies. Um, there is a certain point where we do have to come to terms with the fact that you might just have a certain body type.
Hmm.
That might just be the case. For myself, I will never be a petite female. I'm not built that way, but I can do other things that lean into my strengths rather than constantly focusing on what society says is my weaknesses or my flaws, right? And to your point, like I always say, changing the narrative of what healthy looks like, right? Because we do see healthy is a size, it's a weight. Um, a lot of my clients get stuck on the mentality around what they need to see on the scale or what their BMI chart might say, when in reality, those don't actually tell us a whole lot about someone's health. It tells me how much the body that you live in ways. Okay. That doesn't tell me a whole lot of what's going on internally. That doesn't tell me your relationship with food. It doesn't tell me your mindset, right? We have a lot of people who look very healthy, quote unquote healthy, right? Very fit, but their mentality around food and about their body is in the trash, right? And it's all about finding a space where you can balance and respect your body because it's the only one you'll ever have.
Yes, very true. Very true. And you're very wise. You're not yet 30, right? You're getting ready to turn
Yep,
30. You're
I turned
very
30
wise.
in a couple of weeks. Thank
Because
you.
I'm putting myself in your shoes when I was 30 and I was still caught in that starve myself. I'd go up about 5 pounds and go, oh, okay, that's unacceptable. Starve
Yeah.
back down again and, never picked up a weight.
Mhm.
Now, do you have a certain type of eating plan, or are you centered around whole foods? Do you allow yourself treats? What does Allie's day look like?
Oh, girl, I allow everything. So I coach intuitive eating. So the way that I look at food is there are foods that are going to be more nutritious, right? They have vitamins, nutrients. And then there's foods that are just going to be more satisfying, right? And if we don't allow all of them, what tends to happen is we become like prefixed or obsessed with the things that we can't have, right? So when I talk about intuitive eating, I always laugh because people look at me and go, "Oh, so I can eat whatever I want." I'm like, "Yes, but it doesn't mean you can eat like an asshole." It's a different mentality, right? The mentality is it's usually not the food that's the problem. It's usually not our body that's broken. It's our relationship to it. It's how we use it, right? So I look at who are you being around food. So if you are given the option of having whatever you want, are you making choices that honor what your body needs and also maybe what your body's craving, right? Are we finding the balance? Are you making choices that respect your body through movement, right? Intuitive eating, although it talks about food, it talks a lot about movement, about mental health, about just respecting yourself as a person. So, in the same way that we maybe restrict food when we think we've been bad, and then you notice how we typically binge eat anyways, right? Because our body needs the nutrients still, it still needs food. We do the same thing with movement, where if we have overeaten at a holiday, well, we think I need to go burn it all off. I need to have a heavier, harder workout. And every single workout I do has to have cardio and I have to be there for 2 hours, right? Um, or you see the all or nothing, and women don't go at all. They develop such a negative relationship with it that then they just stop moving altogether. So I guess the roundabout answer to that is I allow everything. I do for myself prioritize more whole foods because they make me feel better. Um, I've been watching a couple of different documentaries also on just the differences of what foods do cause, like visceral fat and internal health changes. So I'm a total nerd. I love researching all of it. But what I actually coach my clients on is more their relationship to it so that they can make better choices.
I think you bring up some really good, important points. Is that relationship with food is key.
Mhm,
I have a client, and I am so proud of this client. And yes, she has lost weight.
mhm,
But more important than that weight loss was she developed a healthier relationship with food and food freedom.
mhm.
So she came on board with me with a
Yeah.
binging disorder really. And so we would make so much progress and then there'd be the binging and back and forth.
Mhm.
And I was on a call with her the other day and she said, it's been almost a year since I did the emotional eating, the emotional binging. It's gone. And now she'll go out, she'll have a glass of champagne, she'll have a little dessert, but not go overboard. And then most of her diet is, pretty clean, but she's got the little treats in there along the way, and she's enjoying going out. And to me, that meant more than 100-pound weight loss could ever mean.
Yeah, and I even think it's interesting, like the word choice we use, right? We were talking earlier before this call, um, just the wording that we've seen over the decades and how it's kind of pivoted. And I think like a word you just said, oh, she eats mostly clean. And I always
Mhm.
joke with my clients and I say, oh, does that mean you wash your food?
I love it.
Right?
Yeah, it's funny.
Because
We
clean can be, and it's an operative word. It's a word that can mean a lot of things to different people, right? Um, and so I think to your point, I think the biggest key here for women is if we feel like we're struggling to find balance and our bodies are not changing and we're not feeling good in our own skin, I usually ask them to take a step back and look at why are we doing what we're doing, right? If we're restricting or we think we have to eat less, okay, what is that maybe then causing? Well, it might be causing the binge eating. It's causing the moments where you go out to eat with friends and you are so anxious because you don't know what you're allowed to order. Versus if we work on our relationship to food, we find a balance to having whatever we want, those special treats or the forbidden foods, as I call them, don't become that exciting anymore because you can have them whenever you want. So,
it's true. That's true. One thought that really swirled through my head was getting ready for bodybuilding shows.
mm,
I did, 16, 17 shows. I lost count. I don't do them anymore.
yeah,
But I remember the first two or three before I really got a handle on it, the hunger and the cravings coming off of a show were just insane. It's like your brain's screaming at you. And
yeah,
you want everything at once. You want the Chinese food, the Mexican food, the don't eat, like you want everything.
yeah.
And what really finally helped me was saying, you can have these things coming off of a show and
Mhm.
choose one thing that you're craving and have a nice meal out after the show. And that helped me a lot because what I found was you would eat the food and it was never as satisfying as
Right.
what you had imagined in your head. And so eventually you kind of figure that out and go, I don't feel that great if I binge on that food.
Yeah. I always love using the analogy, and it's very silly, so stick with me. But I love using the analogy of when you're dating and you're attracted to someone, and there's someone that's like slightly out of your reach, right? They might call you every once in a while, but they don't really talk to you consistently, and they're not really giving you all the attention that you want. You are obsessed. You want to contact them constantly. You want to see them all the time. You can't really put your finger on why you like them, but you want what you can't have, right? And then when you have someone that wants to talk to you all the time that says, "I will give you the world, just like let me have a chance." We usually don't like that person because it's too easy, right? It's too available. The same is true with our relationship with food. When we put up the restrictions of saying I can't have that or that's bad, or I'm not allowed or I need to be good, our brain has no idea why we're doing that. Our brain simply thinks, oh, food is no longer available, and so it places a high emotional charge on that experience and tells you, oh, I want more of that. It can't process the negative. All it hears is give me more of the thing that you can't have. And so I try to help my clients get to a point where they feel like everything's available. It's almost so ungodly available that they just don't really care anymore.
Mm, I love it. I love it. Yeah, because we fixate on the very thing that we cannot have,
Yeah.
whether it's the person we want to date, the job we want, the
Mhm.
food we want, we fixate on it. I remember before I would go in to prep for a show and having the mentality of, oh, I better go have pancakes and I
Mhm.
better go have this and that and
Mhm.
fill up on it,
Well,
which
because
was is a
I'm never going to have them again.
yeah,
Mhm.
it's this deprivation mindset, and it took me a few years to get to that point where I go, it's 12 weeks you're prepping, Carol. No big deal. You'll have what you want after, and it was so much better once I did that. Now I want to touch on the body dysmorphia because I think that's huge, even for men, not just for women, but for men
Absolutely.
too. I saw it a lot in the bodybuilding community and experienced it myself You get super lean. Everybody's stopping you at the gym to ask how you got the six pack, eight pack abs. You got
Yep.
the veins popping, your shoulders popping. And then you come off of the show and you start to come back to a normal, healthy body fat because that was not sustainable and it
Right.
wasn't healthy.
Right.
And I know I've done it, look in the mirror and go, oh, you're a slob. Look at you,
Mhm.
look at you, look, your stomach's sticking out. And it's not true. Like many women would go, wow, you look great. I would love to look that way. But you
Yep.
don't see it. It's like you see somebody, my husband would even say, I don't know who you're seeing in the mirror, but it's not the same person I'm seeing.
Yeah. It's a psychological shift, right? When we talk about body dysmorphia, and what's funny is I didn't know what that term meant actually until I was in college. I was in a nutrition class because I thought if I got a minor in nutrition, I could learn everything there was to know, and then I could fix myself. I was still in the mentality of if I know more, I can lose weight and be happy. And I learned the term body dysmorphia, and it just clicked. It was like, holy crap, this is what I've had my whole life. I've never seen myself the way that other people see me, right? Because of all of the, I would say, all of the messaging, like you probably experienced with body build need. You're around the world that says if you are a lean fat percentage, you get a trophy, right? That's what the end goal is. And so we see that so often as like that's what health looks like. It's the pinnacle of health. And we're not realizing that healthy doesn't actually have six pack abs a lot of the time, right? And so our own like self image gets shifted. Um, I even think it's really important to note, like what you just said, you looked in the mirror and immediately the words that came out of your mouth were negative, right? Again, it has so much more to do with what we're thinking and what we're feeling than anything to do with our actual physical body.
It really does. I agree there. We get these perceptions in our head, and it's like limiting self beliefs
Yeah,
that we
yeah,
carry. Maybe from childhood, we carry these things. And then you get into a community where being really shredded
yeah,
is glorified.
yeah.
And yes, it's a sport, and sports can get extreme, like any sport can get extreme, but that can be difficult to reverse that
Absolutely.
thinking. Now, when you get a woman coming in and she has this really poor body image and this body dysmorphia, and she's not seeing herself, her own beauty, her own worth, how do you move her out of that mindset into a different mindset?
Yeah, so I think it's twofold. One, we have to understand where the mindset's coming from, right? In order to move forward, I always say we have to reflect back. So we have to understand before we can fix something, or I hate using the word fix, but when we can shift the perspective, when we can transition out of the way we've always been acting, we have to understand why it's happening in the first place, right? The why under the why. So with my clients, I typically walk them through how to, first write down all of the things that they say to themselves, all the things that they think or feel on a daily basis. What are the common things that are coming to mind, right? Whether it's, oh, I look fat in this. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not smart enough, right? I'm not allowed to have that because if I have that, then I'm too weak to stay motivated, right? All of the limiting beliefs that we think on a daily basis. Um, and mind you, women think over 60,000 thoughts a day. So it's a lot of limiting beliefs if we're in that headspace, right? I have them write all of them down. And then I ask them the question of who or what taught you this? Who or what taught you this to be true, right? Give me factual evidence that this is true. In more cases than not, they look back and they say, well, my mom's experience with dieting taught me this. I heard my dad say this to me when I was younger. And so I just always believed it to be true. I had a boyfriend, a girlfriend say this to me, and I held that as true so that I didn't get hurt again, right? So much of what we believe is not really even our own thoughts, it's someone else's experience that then taught us to believe that way. And so we have to almost like give back the things that are not ours, right? It was never ours in the first place. So why are we carrying it? And then the second piece of that, I think, is starting to help them shift to neutral, right? We place so much emphasis on what our bodies look like. But what does your body looking a certain way really give you, right? When you meet someone, you don't go, oh my gosh, I can't wait for you to meet her. She's so skinny. That that would be ridiculous. You say, I can't
Mhm.
wait for you to meet her. She's so talented and kind and loving, and right? You use all the other attributes that describe how you make someone else feel, right? So what does your body size actually give you? And if we can take a step back from that, we can find more neutrality of saying, okay, I really like what I look like in this color. I love how my body is strong and takes care of me and can hold my kids, right? I love the way my laugh sounds, right? We start to shift away from the specific flaws or sizing or image, and we start to shift towards things that actually bring us more life.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Thank you.
As you were speaking, I was thinking about, we had talked about Sophia Loren and Marilyn Monroe prior to hitting record on this episode. And I want to back up a little bit
Absolutely.
because I think this all plays in these limiting self-beliefs, but then looking back on how women were perceived and their bodies and how the bodies have changed,
Oh,
like the ideal quote unquote body image has really changed. And I had a couple of notes on I love the Sophia Loren post. So I'm going to scroll down here. She was measured to be a standard size 16 back in the 1960s, but only a size 8 by today's metrics. And she was called out on her eating habits because of her size and cautioned, this is so funny, about her love for pasta, which she liked to enjoy with red wine. And her response, don't you know that everything you see I owe to spaghetti? What a
what
quote.
a
I
powerful statement.
absolutely loved that. And I loved her. I was
Yes.
telling Allie, my middle child, Sophia, is actually named after Sophia Loren. I absolutely idolized this woman when I was a little girl. I thought she was just so beautiful. Do you want to talk about that
Yeah.
perception?
I love, and we chatted about this before recording, but I love looking at the classic icons and the women that we still talk about today. And you notice how we're talking about them because of the way that they showed up, the way they celebrated who they were and the bodies that they had. Um, it really had nothing to do with their size, because their size is so misconstrued over the decades. Um, I mentioned Marilyn Monroe was one as well, where we see Sophia Loren as these body positivity curve icons, when in reality, if you actually looked at their measurements, they were very petite women. They were pretty standard sized females. But at the time, at the era that they were in, they were curvy. They were different than everyone else, and they were beautiful, but they also got a lot of negativity. They got a lot of backlash because of the bodies that they had. And both of those women said things along the lines of, like, this is the body I have. I need to celebrate it. I think the quote from Marilyn Monroe was something along the lines of, like, I think one of the most incredible things is to be a woman, right? It has nothing to do with what size you are. It's the mentality around, like, I'm a powerful female. Look at what I can do. Look at who I am. Because I'm so much more than the measurements that might change and manipulate over time. Um, I'm also curious if you know anything about, like, how vanity sizing has shifted. Why I mentioned in that post that she was a certain size
Right.
in the 1900s versus a certain size now. Marilyn Monroe, for instance, was a standard size 12. And so in today's society, we're thinking, okay, so she was curvy, right? She's known for her hourglass figure. What we don't realize is that in the 1950s, there was a standard sizing. So every single clothing company, everyone in the fashion industry had to measure based upon the same sizing standards, right? And they measured women by bust first, then your waist, then your hips, and they truly were measuring to a woman's figure. In the 1980s, they actually got rid of standard sizing because clothing companies wanted to lean into what's called vanity sizing, vanity metrics, where they could change the sizing and they could make it a smaller number because they could sell more items. So you see women like Marilyn Monroe, who was a standard size 12 in 1945, and in 2024, she'd be a size 4, right? She's a petite woman. But we don't realize that because that's not something we really talk about. We just see, okay, body types or body image has changed over the decades, but we're not realizing how much also, I would say, changes or is affected by those shifts.
Oh, yes. No, you make a very good point there, and it isn't talked about. I remember that shift happening. I'm 62, so I remember I remember wanting to be a size 6, like 4 or 6 was like, oh, wow, you were really slender. You were, they use the term slender, and wanting to fit into that size. And then something shifting long about the 80s where, oh, now I am that size. How did that happen?
Yeah.
And yeah, it's really, and now you've got like XXX and,
Well,
double
you
zero.
and when you look at the fact that diet culture really plays into it. Not to go down a completely different rabbit hole, but I look at truly if we're looking at why our society does what it does, at the end of the day, it's to make money, right? That's any business plan. So vanity sizing changed so that it could sell more things to make more money, right? Body image or what's the beauty expectation changes every couple of decades because they don't want anyone to achieve it because they'll stop making money, right? So we've got to change, we've got to pivot every 10 years or so, right? I think back to I grew up in the 2000s. I'm a 90s baby. And in the 2000s, you had really thin, like Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera, right? They were very thin. That's what the goal was. And then you add 10 years and you have women like Kim Kardashian, who now it's about having a bigger hips, having bigger bust, like completely different body types. So if you're going for one goal and then they change what the industry is slowly over time, you can never achieve it. So you're constantly going to think that there's something wrong with you. You're constantly going to believe the insecurities that they've taught you. And you're probably going to end up spending a lot more money.
Yes. And you know what? It can swing both ways
Yeah.
because you can be just a naturally slender body
Mm-hmm.
type. I've trained women like that where they're just naturally very, very lanky and thin.
Yep.
And what do they want? They want that
They want
curvaceous
the
look
curve,
or
want the
or the
muscle.
muscle, and they're
Yeah.
practically killing themselves to put it on. I actually, that's how I injured my back. I had a couple of serious back injuries,
Mm-hmm.
and it was from trying to make my body do something that, especially on my lower body, because I have very long legs and they're not thick. So I was trying to get these thick quads and this big butt, and yeah, blew a disc
Yeah.
squatting, trying to get this body that, for the bodybuilding world,
Mm-hmm.
that my frame, even my husband said, "You're petite, your frame won't take that. Your bones won't
Well,
take that."
it becomes dangerous
Hmm.
because now, and I say this to my clients too, we're now getting to a point in society where the beauty expectation has not only changed from okay, you need to be thin but also curvy enough, but now it's getting to the point where you have to have surgery, you have to have procedures to even get close to what the beauty expectation is. Not to mention everything we see on social media now with filters and editing. And we're really setting up the younger generation to fail because they're not seeing that a lot of these things, or even the way these people look, doesn't actually exist.
Yeah, it's kind of smoke. I call it smoke and mirrors. And
Absolutely.
we had it, and I'm sure your mom talked about this. It's like you had the lights, the tan, the way you posed and to hide flaws, and it
Yes.
was smoke and mirrors. And it was funny because women would tell me, "Oh, I could never do. Oh, I can never. I got this flaw and that flaw and that." I said, "Oh no, you'd be surprised backstage. We've all got these things going on."
Yes.
But smoke and mirrors, you put that tan on, you put that bronzer on, and you just pose a certain way to hide it.
Well, and I think it's interesting, going back to the bodybuilding world. Um, and I'm not sure if I've said this while we've been recording, but growing up in the gym, my mom, my uncle, they were very big into the bodybuilding community. My uncle won multiple trophies and was very well known in our community for that. Um, and it's interesting knowing a lot of individuals that did compete and then talking to them now. I was actually talking to a woman the other day who I've grown up knowing, and she was very, very well versed in the bodybuilding community. She won a ton of shows a couple of decades ago, and now she admits, she's like, my relationship with food, my relationship with my body is 10 times worse than it was when I was competing because of, right, the we're all talking about the flaws, we're all analyzing our body down to the ninth degree, that now at, in her 50s, 60s, she's gained a lot of weight because she's has this unhealthy relationship with food. And she said mentally, that's the hardest part, is had someone told her it doesn't have to be this way, she's like, I would have spent so much more time being present. I would have been able to enjoy my life a little bit more. I would have been able to, go to social events and not bring my Tupperware of food. And I would have worn the things I wanted to wear. Um, and now she's at a point in her life that she's like, I don't know that it can even be shifted because it's been so long that I've held these beliefs about food
Mm,
in my body.
mm.
It kind of broke my heart.
That is heartbreaking. I think a lot of women go in kind of blind. I went in blind.
Yeah.
And my first show, I thought, okay, I'm going to get shredded and then I'm going to look that way the rest of in my mind, it was like going to be, that's it. I'm going to change my body and it's going to stay that way,
Yeah.
not understanding that that's not even healthy and it's not sustainable. It's a
Mhm.
look for the stage, it's a sport.
Well, and
And
it's interesting because it correlates so much even uh, to just diet culture in general. The women that I work with, most of the women I work with have never gotten near bodybuilding. They've just always heard eat less, move more. If you're smaller, you're happier, right? You're more accepted, you're more beautiful. Um, but what's interesting is they're taking pieces from like the bodybuilding sport and trying to make that applicable. So they're thinking, well, if I lose the weight, if I do this quick fix diet and I lose the weight, then I'm done. I fixed it.
mhm,
I'm
mhm,
this way forever, right? And I tell them, there's a reason why you keep doing the same thing different day and getting the same result that you don't want, right? You maybe lose the same 10 pounds every couple of years and it keeps getting harder and harder to do so, right? Because it's not sustainable. It's not something that's realistic for you to do the rest of your life.
right. And then you've got, hunger hormones that go out of balance.
Yes.
So I always tell ladies, our brains don't care what we look like in a bikini. They want to keep us safe and alive. And
Yes.
if you're, 8% body fat as a female, that's not good. It's not good for fertility. It's not good for a lot of things. And so then your brain will just start screaming at you to eat the thing. I've been there, and it's a mental battle.
It is. And what's interesting is, again, we think, oh, this could only happen if, like you said, like you're at a lower body fat. That's not true. It can happen at any size. I work with a lot of women that by society standards, are overweight, or even getting close to obese. And it's not because they're eating excessive amounts of food and they're never working out. I would argue that most of them have been dieting since they were children, and their metabolism, their hormones, their relationship with food is so out of whack that their body simply doesn't know what to do. It's holding on to any body fat it can. It's keeping their metabolism low because it's like you said, it's keeping them safe and secure. It's keeping them alive because it doesn't know whether it can trust them or not.
That's a good way of explaining it.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, I don't want to forget to ask this. So, a couple of different things. What is the typical age and of women that you're working with and their situation? Are they, do they ever come in like thinner with a history of dieting and they're trying to get away from it, or they generally are overweight by societal standards?
Mhm.
What type of women are you working with?
So it's interesting. I'd say all of the above. Um, I think when it comes to our relationship with our bodies and with food, there's not a size and there's not an age demographic that specifically hits. I've had women as young as, in their 20s. I've had parents actually have me work with their daughters that are in high school. And I've worked with as old as 60s, women that are postmenopausal and have been dieting their whole lives. Um, I really work with anyone and everyone that falls into that category of, hey, I've struggled with my body. I don't see food as a good thing. I'm scared of it, right? Um, and I want to feel comfortable in my skin. I'm sick of feeling this way, right? So I always say it's more of like a mentality that they have to be in order to start this work than a body, because I think a lot of times we think, well, I'm not sick enough to invest in myself. And I thought that way about myself for a very long time. I saw it as, well, I have kind of an unhealthy relationship with food, but I don't have a quote unquote eating disorder. Little did I know, binge eating and disordered eating, in my opinion, is an eating disorder. I wasn't extremely heavy. I wasn't extremely small. So I didn't see myself as, oh, I'm not sick enough to ask for help. When in reality, I think anyone can benefit from coaching, from asking for help, from working on their relationship with themselves and with food. So really, I work with anyone and everyone because that relationship doesn't care what size of body you're in. You can be skinny and struggle with the way that you look, and still feel like you're too big. And I have women that are larger and are being told by their doctors, well, just get on a diet. Just get on some diet and lose weight, and then you'll be healthier. Um, it's so much misinformation. So yeah, I really work with anyone and everyone, and I love it that way. I love that I get to hear a lot of different life experiences.
Oh, I bet. And you're right. It knows this type of issue, it's across the demographics. So it
Yes.
doesn't matter ethnicity,
Mm-mm.
age, financial situation. You just see it across the board. Absolutely. Do you have any men ever come into your program?
Um, I've had men ask. I specifically only work with women. I think there's some wonderful coaches out there that work specifically with men. I'd be interested to see, as things do start to shift in the health industry, if this becomes more prevalent within men. But for me, I just looked at it as like, this was my own story. This was something that I struggled with for over a decade of my life. And I really wanted to give back to the girls who were so similar to me and desperately needed someone the way that I did.
Mm, love it. And you've worked with all these different ages.
Yeah.
What would the you now tell the little Allie growing up and coming into womanhood?
I would tell her there's a reason for it. There's a reason for all of it. Um, I look back on all that I've experienced, um, and all the struggles I had and the really dark points of my life. And you're not always told right away why it's going to happen, but I do truly believe there's always a reason. There's always a reason and a season, and things are supposed to happen the way that they happen. And you might not know the answer. You might not know why. You might not know why in your entire lifetime, but there's always a reason. And I look back at all the things that I went through, and I was supposed to go through it so that I could be in this position now. I was supposed to have those conversations so that I could be a voice for the voiceless. And at the time, if I had probably heard that, I would have said like, great, thanks, but I don't want it. Can we just not have this be an issue? Right. Um, but I think that's kind of a beautiful mentality to have moving forward, realizing that the struggles that we go through, they feel so heavy and so all consuming when we're in them. But remembering that like there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. There's always a reason for us going through this period of our lives. And we can either take it as failure or we can take it as feedback. One's going to keep us stuck, one's going to let us grow.
Yes, yes, so good. Finding that purpose in the pain. So we go
Yeah.
through these painful things. I know I've had them too, and out of painful experiences, having a very difficult menopause transition was one of them, autoimmune another.
Mhm.
From those came the coaching that I do today
Yeah.
and how I'm able to help women today. Because you gotta have walked in their shoes to really
Yes.
understand this.
Oh, 100%. I tell women all the time there's two things you need to look for when you hire a coach. When you're thinking about asking for help in any of these categories, is one, do you like them? Like if you're going to spend this much time with someone and have to be really intimate and share your whole life details, do you like the person? Right? Do you kind of aspire to be like them? And two, do they know what they're talking about? Yes, I have certifications, I have education in what I coach, but no one ever asks me about that. They always ask me, what's your story? What have you been through? Because I truly believe if you're hiring someone that's never been in your shoes, they can't understand what you're going through. And it really isn't going to normally last. It's not going to work, because you have to have that commonality.
Those are two really good pieces of advice.
Yeah.
I say things similar to that. They really need to have walked your walk and understand what you're going through. And yes, you have to have that rapport with them where, yeah, I really like this person. I could go hang out and have coffee with Allie
Yes.
or Carol. You have to have that. And then I also say, I'll add on a lifelong learner is something I say, because
Mhm.
I have been wrong about things where I come back on and say, you know what? I used to think this. Oh
Yep.
no, now I think this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you can only take clients as far as you've taken yourself. And if you decide to stop and you say, this is the only way I'm going to think now for the rest of my life, this is where I'm at, then how are you supposed to help other people? Because then you can only take them to that point too, right? You have
Right?
to constantly be evolving and growing. Um, and I said this on another podcast, but that's not always a fun transition, right? Growth is usually kind of painful. It's usually uncomfortable. Um, but it's so worth it because that vulnerability also makes you more real, right? It allows your clients to trust you more because they know, oh, life's not always going to be perfect. If I follow these goals or if I, follow this program, life's still going to happen. But let me learn how to navigate it when life happens and not just when everything's fine.
Yes, very true. I say something very similar. People will ask, well, I'm going to be vacationing and I'm going to be going to, and I'm doing this and that. Maybe I should wait
Yeah,
to start a coaching program. And I'm like, no, because you need to learn to navigate through those very situations of being at a
exactly.
wedding and traveling and all of the things. So that's a very good point.
Yeah.
Uh, Allie, as we start to wrap up, I want to be respectful of your time. I just want to say I'm so impressed with just having followed you on social media, the time we've spent here today, because I see other women doing something similar, and it's not to slight what they're doing, but I love that you bring in some science, that
Mhm.
you bring in very real tactical steps and situations, and I love that.
Yeah. Thank you. I always say that I kind of live in the gray space. I think you can either be really far over and be on the fitness influencer side where you've got the meal plans and the workout plans and all the science, right? Or you can be on the other side where it is more like the body positivity and just love yourself as you are. And I like to be in the middle because most people live in the middle. You have to have a little bit of science to make it logical and make it make sense. But you also have, I kind of like to say like the woo woo, right? Like living in the gray space of opportunity because you have to have both, right? In order to not only achieve your goals, but to like live the life that you actually desire to live. Um, we like to put ourselves in boxes far too often. And I always ask my clients, I'm like, if you could truly feel how you want to be feeling, like what is that feeling like? Describe that to me. I don't care about the goals or the New Year's resolutions. Explain how you want to be feeling, and let's work towards that.
Yes, and I love that touch of woo woo and a touch of science,
Oh yeah.
where where woo woo meets science. I love it. It's
Yes.
because it really is. It's not an all or nothing thing.
No.
You can have the best meal plan, the best science, and all of it laid out. I've been there.
Yep.
But if somebody can't implement it and it's not realistic for them, where are you going to go with that?
Exactly. Not very far.
Mm-mm. Now, how can listeners get a hold of you, work with Allie, follow you on Instagram?
Yes, come hang out with me. You can find me on any social media at Ask Coach Allie. It's ALI. My website is the same. It's askcoachally.com. I love connecting with people. I love hearing their stories. So if this resonated with anyone, I would love for you to slide in my DMs, send me an email, and I would just love to hear more about it.
Wonderful. I'll make sure all of this is in the show notes, Allie. And
Perfect.
thank you again. It's absolutely been a pleasure.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I've loved it.
And to our listeners, wherever you are in the world, we wish you every blessing. Bye bye.